Does texting cause problems in your marriage? Well, if you've ever had a text go sideways, that's what I'm talking about today. So stick with me. Um, I'm Lesli Dories, your marriage coach and the creator of the Hero Husband Project and owner of Foundations Coaching. And texting is wonderful. It's a great way to communicate. It allows us to be in contact with each other, to share whatever we need to say right in the moment. And guess what? That's also part of its problem. Because when we text, we're usually thinking really quickly. We're just trying to get some information out. And I don't know if you and your partner have actually established guidelines for texting. I'm old enough to remember when we actually had telephone booths and our phones attached to the wall, and there was no instant 24-hour way to get in touch with people. And as hard as the conversations might have been in those days, they can be a lot harder now, because texting actually allows us to hide, but it also can get us into trouble. And the reason why it can get us into trouble is because when you send a text, all you have is the words. And you know what you mean to say. That doesn't mean that your wife knows what you mean to say. And even simple messages like, hey, honey, running late, we'll be there in 15 minutes, might not go over well if your wife is anxious or is one of these, or likes to be on time. Maybe she's one of these people who says, if you're on time, you're actually 5 minutes late. So even a simple message like that cannot be well received, because all you have are the words. You don't have any facial expression. You don't have any tone of voice. You don't have any body language. Yes, you've got emojis, but sometimes those emojis really, it's like, so you put that little smiley, hey, I'm kidding emoji. It may not be received that way. And that's the difficulty. And too many of my clients use texting as a way of dealing with hard topics, because actually having a face-to-face conversation is really tough. So they hide behind these wonderful little things, right? They hide behind texting. And all I can tell you is you do not want to have a in-depth or a conversation about an issue between the two of you just using the words and in text. And the other issue with this is because, you're having the conversation in real time, so you're actually not necessarily being able to see how that lands. Now, you might be, you make assumptions about what your partner is thinking and feeling based on the way that she responds back to you. And I'm just saying, I say texting is great for some things, but please use it really, really carefully. Several years ago, I was working with Sam, and his wife texted him that she was leaving for a long weekend that she was having with the girls. Now, they were not in a good place when they were doing this. And he texted back to her, I don't want you to go. Now, what he meant was, I'm going to miss you. But because they weren't in a good place, she took it as he was angry and forbidding her to go. Like, I don't want you to go, right? There's, I really don't want you to go. And I don't want you to go. But in a text message, there's none of that facial expression. There's none of that tone of voice. You just have the words. And so she got really upset. And when she came back, they didn't talk to each other for 2 weeks. So we have to be really, really careful. What we say is heard through our partner's lens. And, if you're in a really good place in your relationship, some of these miscommunications aren't that damaging. But if you're not in a good place, then things can get really blown out of proportion. Everything can go sideways, and then you're doing damage control. So it's like, and I get it. I know that it's really, really hard to have conversations about tough topics. And it's easier to try to do it because it's really uncomfortable, and my partner might get mad at me, and we might get into an argument or whatever the reasons are that you're using. And guess what? Texting isn't going to make that less likely. It's actually going to make it more likely, because you're missing critical components of communication. Facial expression, tone of voice, body language gives you a huge amount of information. And we become overly dependent on these quick fixes, on these what people call hacks, And if you and your partner haven't talked about what's okay to text about and when to text, because sometimes somebody will send a text and then it could be hours before they get a response, and that just, and especially if you're trying to have a conversation, if you're trying to solve a problem, if you're trying to deal with a hard topic, that makes it worse, as opposed to you and I are sitting across the table from each other and having a conversation about this thing, right? There's, the immediacy means we can't really stop and reread and think about it. We just type it in and we hit send. And what our intentions are and what they take it as are not the same thing. And, this is, again, this is just another way of thinking about how do we best interact, communicate, move forward with whatever it is we're trying to move forward with, okay? So if you have ever sent a text that has not been well received, if you try to communicate through texting, you probably have run into this at some time. And, if you're doing it because you don't know how to have a face-to-face conversation, then I want to invite you to give me a call or DM me or send me a message, get in touch with me in some way. And I can share with you much more effective ways of handling the tough stuff that you guys have to deal with in a way that minimizes the chance of being misunderstood and therefore then having a fight. So if you're interested in that, please get in touch with me, and hopefully before you send off a text to your loved one. Now, it's okay to send a text of, I love you, honey, I'm glad you're in my life, then text away. But any other kind of text than that, stop and think about it a moment. And hopefully you found that helpful. And until next week, stay loving.